What's up, guys? MC Stu here, and today we're going to take a look at the Terran Somerville, and this is going to be a higher-end build. If you're interested in a budget build version of this ship, I will link that down in the description for you. Let's go ahead and jump into it. Alright guys, we are looking at the free event ship. Most of you should be just starting to get this unlocked now, if not already. I did buy this out on my main account and started with a completely free-to-play budget build that did extremely well. Link for that will be down in the description and at the end of the video. Now this build is going to be closer to S tier with a few exceptions or limitations on it. So Nick MB helped me put this together. If you guys are unfamiliar with him, he does stream on Twitch here and there. I'm going to put his link down in the description. I'd highly recommend following him. He's one of the top tier Fury crafters in the game, and so anytime he's live, I would definitely go check him out. And if you have questions or want to see what he's running, he's definitely the guy to talk to. Link down in the description. So the limitation that we put on this particular build is that we did not want to use any lockbox consoles or ship traits. We wanted to make sure that this build was a little easier to obtain, so we skipped, like I said, all lockbox, promo, ship consoles, and traits. So there will be lockbox consoles in this, but these are all items that you can purchase off the exchange fairly easily without any kind of massive grind. All the traits that are used are from either Lobby ships or C-Store ships. I think there's only one Lobby ship trait that's used on this particular build. So it's definitely obtainable if you are someone that's been playing the game for a while and been spending some money over the course of those years. And I mean, let's face it. I mean, if you're going to do top-end builds, you have to spend money in the game, or you have to grind extremely hard for a long period of time. Unfortunately, that's just the way that this game is monetized. So, but I know many of you guys that watch the channel, do have a lot of this gear. Again, one of the other things I try and do when I make builds, be them mid-tier, high-tier, low-tier, whatever it may be, is that I try and make them to where they're not designed around a particular thing, right? So if you don't have that thing, it's just not going to work. For instance, like a Theta build, you can build around this trait that just really excels, does really good, and you could have everything but the Theta trait, and it's just not going to work. So none of the builds that I put out are going to be like that. So if you're looking at this when we go through it and you're like, I'm missing this or I'm missing that, that's okay. It'll still work. You'll just fill it with whatever you have or leave it blank. If you don't have it, it'll obviously do better if you do get it at some point. But the build is not broken if you're missing any individual item off of this. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the build. Now, if you watched the free-to-play build video that I put together, you're going to find it's very similar. In fact, we put this ship together first, and then I just pulled anything that was from a lockbox at all and replaced it with either rep gear, fleet gear, or crafted gear. But otherwise, it is very similar. So the front, the back, and the entire space set is all identical. So let's start at the top here. We have the particle emissions plasma torpedo. This is a crafted item, and this is here for the radiation damage that it does. It says plasma damage. It shows up on your parse if you're looking for it as theta radiation. And it generally is up in the top 3 of the damage getters on the build when you look at the parse. Next, we have the Gravimetric Torpedo. This does a good amount of kinetic damage, but it also will have mini gravity wells that will form off of it and pull targets together. It's not as strong as a regular gravity well, but it helps group things up, which is very important with this type of build where you're doing AoEs and things like that. And the secondary effect does do a good amount of damage on top of the primary kinetic effect. And this is a crafted item, and this is going to be from the Dyson rep. Next, we have another rep item. This is the Phaser Wide Angle Heavy, Dual Heavy Beam Bank. This is from the Discovery rep. This is here with the torpedo in the back, and these are both here just for the 2-piece. On critical hits, this is going to give you a stacking critical severity boost that'll stack up to a maximum of 25%, which is a very big boost for your critical severity. So this is a nice set to be using. And again, these here, I mean, this torpedo being in the back basically never fires. The beams up front will fire, but they don't score very high. They're here primarily for that two-piece set. Let's go ahead and finish up in the back, and then we'll talk about the space set. So here we are using the Neutronic Torpedo, and we are using the advanced Thoron Infused beam arrays, anti-proton array. Both of these are just here for the two-piece set. This is a good torpedo, and on a torpedo build or some other combination that I might be putting together, this is certainly something you would want firing up front. Same thing with the dark matter torpedo, but this is an EPG build, and so these items that are here, just like these two, are going to be there for their set bonuses. And these two are going to give us a 25% boost to radiation damage. And you'll find that, you know, to be the case quite a bit, especially with the EPG builds, science builds in general. We're looking to just boost those damage over time, areas of effect, or your EPG in general. Let's take a look at the space set. So pretty standard lineup here for science builds. You could use a different deflector than this, something that's going to be more complementary to either control or EPG, like the Jorn defense set deflector. You can re-roll that and get quite a bit of EPG out of it. You could use the one that comes off of the Gemidar bug ship that also you can get from that same one from one of the missions out of the Lost Dominion. It's one of the hidden arcs. That one you can roll for, I believe, EPG and control. I wanted to boost more of my critical severity, and that's why I went with the fleet one. So we have 15% crit severity and 4% critical chance. Critical chance isn't a real big issue here because of one of the personal space traits that we're using, and we'll take a look at that here in just a moment. So this is going to come from the fleet colony. Next, we have a crafted deflector. This is a deteriorating secondary deflector, and this is here for the proc that it has, or it's not a proc, it's a guarantee. So radiation dot 2 targets of science bridge officer debuff abilities. So things like structural analysis, or destabilizing resonance beam. Also tachyon beam would get it done as well. I'm not using that on it because some of these other ones were a little bit better in the actual primary effect that they do, but on the free to play build that we did use tachyon beam. But anything that's going to give a debuff effect is going to proc this deflector, and this is going to do a ton of damage. You're going to find this is generally going to be up at the top, or second place in terms of damage output on your build. The reason for that is because anything that is affected by that is going to get 11,900, so almost 12,000 radiation damage, 50% shield penetration every second for 9 seconds. So that's just a ton of damage there. I mean, we're looking at, what, 90,000 radiation damage if it lives that long. That is quite a bit. Next, we are using the prevailing bolstered impulse engine. This is from the competitive rep. On the free-to-play build I was using the tactical version. I didn't have this one made yet, and I needed some more of the elite marks, but I finally was able to get it. The reason this is here is anytime that you activate a Science Bridge Officer ability for 10 seconds, you are going to get an additional flight speed, turn rate, defensive rating, which isn't a big deal, and 10% increased recharge speed on Science Bridge Officer abilities. So this pairs much better than what I had on the free-to-play. I'm switching this out on the free-to-play one because it makes more sense. On the free-to-play and on this one, there's only 2 tactical abilities to proc it. This one's going to have quite a bit more since it's a science build. So there's basically 3 versions of this engine you can get for your 3 different classes, or however you're going to build it. But one lends itself to engineering, other is science, which is this one, and then the tactical one. All right. Next, we are using the 2-piece temporal set. This is coming from the temporal rep. And this is here for the 2-piece that we get from that, and that is 25% all damage for damage over time and hazard effects, which is the majority of what the EPG damage on this ship is doing. So this is giving us a very nice boost for that. In our devices slots, we are using a battery for exotic particle flow. This is giving us a plus 20% bonus, so Cat 2 exotic damage for 20 seconds. we're using the Deuterium Surplus. This is for the extra speed boost. And then I'm using the Kobayashi Maru. If you don't have this, you can fill it in with whatever you want. This calls in the Kobayashi Maru and spits out buffs at random to you and your teammates. All right, moving on to our Universal Console. So this ship has been X upgraded. So we have the Universal Console slot here, and we are using the Genesis Seed. This comes off the Clark Multi-Mission Command Cruiser from the Sea Store. This is giving us a big boost to our radiation damage. It's also giving us some drain expertise, and the clicky on it is phenomenal. This is going to do just a ton of kinetic damage and radiation damage. If you can pull things in with your gravity well and then use this, anything it pulls in it's just going to eat away at it and do quite a bit of damage to it. This is a very, very good console. This was really good when you could pair it with the Agony console that was nerfed. Grav well in, Agony console, and then drop this on it, especially if it was a larger target. You would build up quite a bit of damage there with the Agony console. But this is a great console. The ship itself is pretty decent as well, especially for torpedo builds. Next, we are using the biomolecular infused circuits. This is here for the huge 26.2% critical severity. This also is giving us some hull capacity, which helps with Tyler's duality. It's also giving us a nice little boost to control, which on a ship like this, using gravity well, is always a plus. So two for there. This is a great console. This is a great console all around. This would probably be, if I only had enough Lobi to get one console on an account forever, it would probably be this console here, because you can use it on basically everything. Next, we're using the Plasma Storm generator or module. This one's really cool, the effect on it. So let's start with the stats. So we're getting a boost to our EPG, and we're getting a boost to our control. So we're getting a 2 for there. And then the clicky on it is the one that creates a huge plasma storm. Looks like a big tornado in space. Immersion breaker, obviously, or depending on what side of the fence you fall on. It looks very, very cool. It does a pretty good amount of damage. If you don't have this, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but it is, a nice ability to have that has this area of effect, 3 kilometers, and does a decent amount of plasma damage. I believe that shows up as radiation as well. I'll have to double check that. And it also reduces the flight speed of anything that is caught in it. And this comes off of the Maquis Raider from the Lobi store. Next, we have the console that comes on the ship. This is the Ionic Deflector Inversion. Ionic Deflector Inversion. It feels like it should have one other word at the end. Interesting. Or I'm just reading it wrong. You guys will let me know, I'm sure. So this is going to give us electrical damage. As soon as I get done recording this, I'm going to put this on the summer event ship and see how that does with the jellyfish mode. We're going to get some extra boost out of this or from this with one of the traits that we're running, which we'll get to in a moment. Which is Spore-Infused Anomalies. So that's boosting that. And then we're also getting Starship Shield Regeneration, which really isn't a big deal at all. The clicky on it is pretty decent. On activation, set shields to 0. Then plus 25 to plus 100 Starship Exotic Particle Generation for 15 seconds. So this is going to scale with the amount of shields that is reduced. So if you're at, say, 50% shields and then you activate it, you're only going to, you're going to get in between the 25 and the 100 particle generation. So just know that each second for 15 seconds, we're going to do 2,890 electrical damage to up to 5 nearby targets that are within 5 kilometers. So this does a decent amount of damage and gives you that extra boost. So if you're pairing this up for a quote-unquote alpha strike or something like that, you just need to be careful because it is going to drain your shields down all the way. All right, next we have the Delphic Tear, and this is here for the huge 20% Cat 2 bonus exotic damage. It also is giving us an extra 5% critical severity. Stacking that severity is great. The clicky on it's okay. Does radiation damage, but it's mainly here for those passive. Those bonuses, they don't show up if in your stats if you're looking at your EPG stat number. So these don't show up. So you'll find on builds like this, when you get up into a little bit of the higher end, as long as you're over 250, 260 on that stat, that's not a big deal as long as you have a couple of these consoles that are giving you bonuses on top of it. they don't show up, but they end up equaling out to, you know, much higher than if you were to fill up a bunch of slots just trying to boost that stat number by itself. So just bear that in mind when you're starting to accumulate some of these consoles that give you that bonus damage. Same thing with the next one. This is here for the 25.3% bonus exotic damage. It also has a clicky that does kinetic damage, and it's okay. It's not great, but even if it didn't have a clicky and it just did this bonus damage for exotic damage, I'd still slot it. Next in the science console slots, we are using 2 of the exotic particle focusers. These are from the Fleet Research Lab. On the free-to-play version, we had like 2 more of these, filling in the slots for these other 2 items here. These give you a very nice boost to your particle, your exotic particle generation and your control expertise, which is nice. You can get flavors that give you more of one or the other, depending on what you want. The real nice thing on here on the bottom is you have a 25% chance to gain +6 bonus exotic damage for 30 seconds. It can stack up to 5 times, so that's 30% per when using any exotic damage ability, which on this build, we're using a lot of that. So with 2 of those, we have 2 times that chance. So basically, we could build up to 60% bonus damage for exotic abilities just by using exotic abilities. And it lasts a good amount of time. 30 seconds is excellent. You're going to have plenty of time to be firing off more exotic, you know, damage abilities during that and keep this stacked up and boosted as long as there's bad guys around activated on. So these are great consoles to, you know, fill in gaps, or, you know, if you're missing a couple of these, fill them in with these guys. They are very good. Next, we have the Torment Engine. This is a mission drop, comes from Leap of Faith, and this is here for the increased non-hazard damage over time abilities. 39%, it's a pretty big boost. It's also giving us 39.4 increased fire, radiation, plasma, and physical damage, which is very good. Dealing non-hazard dot damage, has a 10% chance to trigger 2,103 fire damage per second for 5 seconds. Again, I'm still not 100% clear of what non-hazard damage over time ability means. Again, it's kind of conflicting on the wiki. If someone does know and can give me a good explanation on that, I would really appreciate it. All right, moving on. We have the Cutting Tractor Beam. This is a lockbox item, and let me clarify just in case I missed it. So lockbox. These are individual items, so they don't come off a ship. You can just buy these off the exchange, and they run anywhere between 5 million to 20 million on average. So if they're on the higher end, you know, that's 10-15 days of grinding up EC to pick each one up. Not too terrible if you have the time. This is here for the hold regeneration, nice little extra, and the 30% immunized hull plating, so that's giving you more resistance. The big one here, though, if we look at the top of this, is activating universal consoles adds 10% bonus damage to universal consoles for 25 seconds and stacks up to 10 times. That's insane, guys. There's a couple consoles that we're using on here, like Genesis Seed, the Storm Generator, and these other 2 that we named that are going, and this one in itself, the next one we're going to talk about. There's quite a few consoles that have clickies on here, and if you time these out right, so you're spacing them out and you're doing maybe the lower damage output ones first, and then you're using a Genesis Seed or something like that, if you're able to build this ability up, you're talking about 100% bonus damage for your universal consoles. That's crazy. And that lasts 25 seconds, so as long as you can manage this properly, you could build up quite a bit. Now, building up the full 100% would be pretty difficult because you'd really have to time it out, and depending on what you were running in, you would need to be in some sort of sustained combat for a while so that it didn't time out. So you couldn't have a gap of more than 25 seconds where you weren't activating a universal console. So getting the full amount out of that's probably a little tough, unless you're running a Core Fez or something that just has, you know, just longer term sustained, you know, combat, and you have enough clickies on there. But even if you stacked it up to halfway, that's 50% bonus damage. That's crazy. That's really crazy, especially, again, if you at least time it in a way to where you're using like Genesis Seed or the Storm Generator at the end of that. Well, it's not even the end because you use it and it's not like you're done. It just keeps stacking up. So this console, just for that one thing by itself, I'd have it on here. Even if it did nothing else, just that extra boost is huge. The cutting tractor beam, we use this a lot for our supported runs. This will normally be on like one of the support builds. It has a chance to knock shields off line. It does do some kinetic damage. The clickies, like, meh, you know, I click it as long as I remember, but it's one of those things where it's not a big deal other than the fact that by clicking it, you're building up a stack of that 10% bonus damage for all your other consoles. So some of these, they're just really interesting. They do a lot, and they can be used in so many different ways. I mean, on the support build, none of the rest of that matters, just at the end here where you have a chance to shut off shields for a good amount of time. So some of these consoles, they're pretty interesting, and they're pretty versatile in the way that you can use them. This next one is also going to come off of the exchange, comes from a lockbox, not off a ship, but just from one of the lockboxes, so you can purchase it. And this is the Directed Dilithium Resonance Destabilizer. And this has a passive of giving us some additional flight turn rate, which on this ship isn't a real big deal. And then it also gives us a +5 current and maximum shield subsystem power. Meh, kind of whatever on this particular build. But the clicky is pretty nice. It's going to do a 5-kilometer AoE radiation. It also has a debuff for turn and acceleration on the enemy. And if you time this out, you know, around enough enemies, maybe in a gravity well, it does a significant amount of damage. This one was pretty inexpensive on the exchange. When I picked it up, it was like 3 mil. Might pop up a little bit after me saying that, but there's a pretty good supply, guys, generally, of these consoles. They're popular. They come out of the choice pack. So generally, if you wait, you're going to find pretty darn good deals on all 4 of these particular items here. Lastly, for our tactical consoles, we have the Counter Command Multi-Conduit Energy Relay. It's a mouthful, huh? This comes from the mission Surface Tension. This is a free drop, and this is here for the photon torpedo damage, which is boosting one of our torpedoes, but most importantly, this is boosting our radiation damage. This isn't a terrible console to use if you're just doing a phaser or disruptor build, especially if you grab one of the other pieces. The rest of the set pieces from this come from a rep, and you can get a little bit of bonus damage for those different energy types as well. So it's a nice kind of budget way to get a little bit more out of that. But for this particular build, this is here for the radiation damage. All right, let's take a look at the skill tree. It's going to be the same as the free-to-play and basically any other video that I've made on this character because I don't ever change it for the builds. This is kind of a catch-all for me. I use this on my meta top-end torp, build. And have scored good numbers. The skill tree, I don't want to say it's not important because it does matter, but sometimes I'll get someone that says, well, you should put this here and take that off of there. One here and there is not a big deal. For me, the main thing is maxing out the tactical side of it here, and there's some things, like the obviously you need particle generation. This is a big boost to start with as a base. Long-range targeting is extremely important. If you only do 2 in this, you're just going to lose out on a ton of damage when you're farther away. So there's a couple things that kind of matter here, but this I use for all the builds that I do on my main character, and I can tank, EPG, and Torp, directed energy, all of it. So that's what that looks like. For this build, we are running Strategist as the secondary and Temporal Operative as the primary. Let's take a look at the traits, run through these here pretty quick. There is a lot of lockbox ones in here. This is where this can get a little bit pricey when you're looking at 10 to 20 mil plus for some of these. Again, if you're missing any one of these, it's not going to break this build. Even if you're missing Boilers, because we are using Photonic Officer for the cooldowns, Boilers makes that go much better consistently when you're mixing that with something else. We'll start with Boilers. This is a Lobby item. It comes out of the Lobby store, and this is giving us 17.5% chance to reduce the cooldowns on our Bridge Officer abilities, and this happens anytime that you use a Bridge Officer ability. So it's basically self-proccing. Anytime you're activating, Torpedo Spread, you have that chance to cool down anything else that is running that's Bridge Officer ability, like Structural Analysis or Fire at Will. So we'll jump back to the beginning here. Particle Manipulator. This comes from getting your EPG or your science R&D school to level 15. So this is a free trait that you can get, and it is excellent. This gives us a 50% critical chance for exotic damage abilities. That's why stacking crit chance on a build like this isn't a big deal. Having a little bit more doesn't hurt, but at 50%, that's pretty damn good. That means every other ability that you use is going to have a crit on it. And so that's why I focused a little bit more towards stacking on the critical severity. This also does give us some critical severity, an extra 27%, which is, again, a pretty big boost. So when this thing hits, it's going to hit hard, and that's going to happen a lot with your EPG abilities just by having this personal space trait. And so again, get your science school up to level 15, and this will automatically unlock. I would say probably out of any of these abilities, this one would probably be the biggest bummer if you don't have it. But again, you can get it. So just make sure you're grinding those schools up. Duelist Fervor. Whenever you or a teammate kills something, you get plus 5% all damage. Not a huge deal, but a little extra. Stacks 3 times for a total of 15%. That's Cat 1. We have a good day to die. This is specifically for tactical officers. This is going to change Go Down Fighting into a clicky that gives you 50% bonus damage, and this is bonus all damage, so you can use this on any kind of a build. That's why tactical is very good regardless of what you're building towards. In space, I would say it's probably the best way to go. I mean, science has some good stuff as well, but when you look at things like this to where, I have a clicky that refreshes every 45 seconds that gives me 50% bonus damage, and then you pair that with something like, Intelligence Attaché. Every time we get a crit hit, which is every other time, that refreshes 2% faster. This thing is up all the time. On average, we're looking at 15 to 20 seconds. Every 15 to 20 seconds, we're getting this extra bonus damage. And now you can start to see when you look at all those bonus damage consoles and all of those things, how these science builds just, they really can rock very, very hard. It's exciting. Anyways, let's move on to the next one. We have Fragment of AI. This is giving us additional controllability, essentially, is why we have this here. So this was made more so for like a Sci build, so directed energy, science build, or control build. So what it does, we'll just go through it real quick. It gives you 23% energy weapon damage based on your control expertise, maximum plus 30% at 300 control expertise. And then it gives you an extra 50. Now, on this build, I have the dual beam bank up front, and I'm getting some extra damage from that. This is just a Cat 1 boost. It doesn't hurt, but the main reason it's here is for this extra 50% on the control abilities. You are getting a 2 for one of them's just not as big of a deal. Next, we're using Fleet Coordinator, and this is here to give you the 2% bonus damage boost per teammate, and that includes yourself. So on any TFO, you're going to get an extra 10% bonus damage just by having that slotted. Talked a little bit about Intelligence Attaché. This is a great one to have, especially if you're tactical or science. Anytime you get a critical strike, it's going to basically speed up your captain's ability recharge time by 2% every single time you get a critical hit. So if you're getting 50% or more critical hits, you're going to have your captain's abilities recharging very, very quickly. Next, we are using Terran Targeting. This is here for the extra 15% critical severity. Enlightened, this is here for the extra exotic damage boost, 15% Cat 1 and hull regen, which is always nice. Science does tend to grab some attention because you're controlling and doing areas of effect, kind of like Fire at Will. It hits a lot of targets, so it gets a lot of targets looking at you. Next, we're using Unconventional Systems, and this is here for using a Control Bridge Officer ability. Gives -7 recharge for all universal consoles. So anytime I'm using something like Gravity Well, Tractor Beam, or any of these two abilities, Photonic Shockwave, or the Charge Particle Burst, those are all have a control mechanism in them. And I believe Structural Analysis, is that a Uncon proc? I can't remember. Destabilizing Resonance Beam is a control as well. So there's quite a few control abilities on here, which is going to recharge the usability faster of all of our universal consoles. The more we can use all of our universal consoles, the more we're building up that plus 10%, plus 10%, plus 10% bonus damage for all our universal consoles. So you can see how all this really starts to build on itself. Even if we pull one of those things out, though, we're still getting all of these boosts. They're just maybe not happening as largely or as fast as what they could be. And we talked about Boimlers, so we are all good with our personal space traits. Next, let's talk Starship Traits. So all of these are going to be from the C-Store, with the exception of one is going to be from a Lobby ship. Again, if you're missing any one of these individual things, the build will still work, although I might make a minor change, and that's going to be if we don't have Entwined Tactical Matrix. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So first up, we have Checkmate. When activating Control Bridge Officer abilities, plus 30% exotic damage for 15 seconds and projectile weapons damage for 15 seconds. We have some projectiles. We're obviously using a lot of control, and our main damage types are exotic. So this pairs very nicely with this. This comes from the Science Star Cruiser. It's a Odyssey variant, tier 6, or if you have the Legendary bundle, you would get this trait unlocked with the Legendary Odyssey variant. All right, so Entwined Tactical Matrix. This is here mainly so I can spread around more torpedoes, preferably the particle emission torpedo for the radiation that it gives off. So what I have is that if I go into combat and I click torpedo spread, I go into combat, one of these torpedoes fires, and then as soon as one of those torpedoes fires, this is going to light back up, and when I click that, that is going to give me another torpedo spread 1. So the next torpedo that comes up again, it's available, we'll get the torpedo spread 1. And this process will repeat itself. So we're getting basically an extra torpedo spread going back and forth here between those two abilities is what Entwined Tactical Matrix does in this particular instance. If you don't have that, then I would drop Fire at Will and I would use something else like Chemosight or, I don't know, Tactical Team. Probably not Tactical Team, but something else. You could leave this here, but I think like Beam Overload would be better. You would get a little bit more damage out of that with the dual beam bank up front than you would at Fire at Will, and you would attract a little less threat. So what I would do is maybe, if you're missing some of this stuff, refer to the free-to-play version of this ship that I put out, again, down in the description, and I would just kind of go back and forth. Anything that you're missing over here, grab from the other one, and you can just kind of put those two together to fill in the gaps. All right, and that comes from the Gagarin from the C-Store. All right, next we have Weaponized Exotic Particles, and this is giving us plus 75 Starship Particle Generation. This comes off the Trailblazer, which is the Terran Intrepid class-looking ship from the C-Store. All right, this is our Lobby trait. This is coming off of, and I always say this wrong, this is the Tholian Iktomi, I think is how you say that. This is a Tholian ship. The ship itself is pretty decent. This trait is great. So when you run Photonic Officer with this, is called Improved Photonic Officer. What it's going to do is it's going to extend the duration of Photonic Officer by 10 seconds. So it's basically going to keep its uptime up almost 100% of the time, which recharges your bridge officer abilities much faster. And it's going to give you 25% bonus shield healing, 25% bonus exotic damage. There's another big bonus boost for the damage output, and 25% bonus hull healing for 30 seconds. So at 30 seconds, you are going to have, about 10 seconds or so worth of downtime in between this with the cooldown on Photonic Officer. So this tends to be up most of the time. That's why I have Photonic Officer on the spam bar. And just for reference, row 7 and row 8 are on my spam bar. So as I start to click the spam bar, it works its way down here and then onto row 8. So that's the rotation that I'm using here. Next, this is probably one of the best EPG abilities in the game, or that pairs with an EPG build, and that is Spore-Infused Anomalies. This comes off of the C-Store version of this event ship, the Somerville Intel Science vessel. And what this does is whenever you activate a Science or an Intel Bridge Officer ability to foes within 5 kilometers of your anomaly, you're going to get 11,821 electrical damage and you're going to get a negative 21.5 all power levels for 20 seconds. And like almost everything on the ship bridge officer ability wise activates this, all the science stuff. And so this does just a tremendous amount of damage. Everything from your gravity well to your particle burst to your destabilizing resonance beam. It gets it done. It's an excellent trait. I believe I actually picked this up. There was a code giveaway from one of the sites that does it a while back. So keep your eyes open. If they had it out once, a lot of times we see repeats of those. I'll definitely make a video if that comes out again. Otherwise, though, you can pick that up out of the C store or Z store. All right, lastly, for our Starship traits, we have Strike from Shadows, and this is mainly here for the threat generation reduction. So these kinds of builds that have area of effect and have control abilities, like I said before, like fire at will, they attract a lot of attention, which means more things are going to shoot at you. So anything that we can do to reduce that threat generation is going to be really helpful. This is also going to give us an extra 5% critical chance, and it's going to give us an extra 5% bonus all damage. So we are getting a little bit of extra damage boosts out of this, but the main thing for me is reducing that threat generation. All right, for our space reputation, we are using advanced targeting systems for the critical severity. We are using precision for the extra critical chance. Tyler's duality for the critical chance based off of our hit points. We are using auxiliary power configuration offensive. There's a defensive version. This scales off of your auxiliary power setting, which on an EPG build, you're going to have at maximum. So we're getting an extra almost 7% bonus all damage from this. And this will boost any kind of damage. So you could use it on another type of build, but you would need to have your auxiliary power up higher in order to get any kind of benefit out of that. And then lastly, we are using particle generation amplifier, and this is giving us a straight 6.3% bonus exotic damage. Man, these build videos wear me out, and it's a lot of talking. I'm trying to move as quick as I can. So let's move on to stations. All right, let's start with tactical. We've already discussed fire at will and torpedo spread. That is here because we have torpedoes and we're using fire at will in order to proc the entwined tactical matrix. If you missed that part or skipped ahead, back up a little bit during the traits, and I'll cover that there for you. Next, we are using concentrated firepower, and so this has a command seating on it. I could have went with a spread here, but having the concentrated firepower basically gives us a free high yield that doesn't lock out our other torpedo abilities. It also recharges our torpedo abilities faster as well, so it just kind of pairs nicely with the tactical torpedo side of it, which is a small part of the build, but with an EPG build, there's not a lot else to do, with the tactical part of it. Now, I could have filled this up with science slots as well, because this ship just has a ton of universal seating. You can make it all science if you want to. And I'm not saying don't do that. Definitely experiment. I know on a lot of these real high-end science builds, they won't have any tactical at all. If anything, maybe I would have went engineering there and maybe a tactical here. I don't know. Let's not talk about what I might have done. Let's keep moving on here. Next, we are using Subspace Vortex, and this is going to also proc our spore-infused anomalies, and it's going to do a good amount of kinetic damage on its own. Next, we have Destabilizing Resonance Beam 1. Again, this is going to proc our secondary deflector. I believe this procs spore-infused as well. Does a very good amount of physical damage, and it also has some debuff on it as well, which is really nice. This comes from a mission, and I forgot what it was on the last one too, and I didn't put it in my damn notes. I'm sorry, guys. Just look this up. This is a mission drop. Once you get it, you can basically train yourself in the ability to make these manuals for yourself. They are tied to characters, so you'll have to do it. You can't move it around between your characters. It's one of the missions in the Iconian arc. So just look it up. It'll show you where to go and get that. Next, we are using Delayed Overload Cascade. This can do a ton of damage. This comes from the choice pack from the lock boxes. You buy it off the exchange. 37,000 kinetic damage this thing does. And that's without it all being boosted up. So imagine with this thing boosted up. This can do a ton of damage. But at the same time, this also has a repel effect on it. And if you use it incorrectly, you can send things flying all over the map, and you'll spend the next couple minutes trying to hunt them all down and kill them. So be careful in the way that you use it. It's really good for large targets that are by themselves, or if you just put a gravity well off and it's a decent gravity well, it's got a good negative repel rating on it, then that'll help pull these all back in. They'll mostly be dead by the time you do hit it, but if you do use this on a primary target and there's a bunch of other smaller ones around it, if they don't die, they are going to go flying. So just bear that in mind. You need to be careful in the way that you use this. Next, we're using Very Cold in Space. This comes from the Winter Event store, and it has, I think it's, I had to look up what they called it. So it's Cryonic Turbulence is the damage that this does, and it does pretty darn good. You can get anywhere between 8 to 20k out of this effect here. It also does cold damage on top of that, which I think is the parse reads it as cryonic damage. But it's a great filler ability. It's not like the best one in the world, but it does good damage, and it's easy to get, it's cheap to get. You can just pull it from the Winter Event store. Charge Particle Burst is also a control ability, so this is going to be an uncon as well. That is going to recharge your universal consoles. This is also going to proc your spore-infused anomalies. Next, in engineering, we have emergency power to auxiliary, and this is just giving us a big boost to our auxiliary power. Auxiliary power is equal to weapons power for weapons. So auxiliary power for EPG and control abilities needs to be maxed all the way out. And anytime that we use this here, and we'll just do a quick demonstration. So right now we are sitting at 111. So we're over capped a little bit there. And if we use that, that is going to boost us up to the max 130, which is very, very nice. It also it increases your perception radius, which isn't really useful for much. It's going to give us another 10 on our particle generation expertise, and it's going to give us another 10 for our control expertise, which is good. Next, we have Structural Analysis 1. This is also a choice lockbox item. You buy it off the exchange. This is will boot or is procced by or procs your deflector. This is also going to do a 21 or negative 21 all damage resistance for 12 seconds to your enemy that you have targeted. It's going to spread to one additional target within 4 kilometers every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. So you'll get an additional, 4 targets that'll get that debuff on it, which is really, really nice. And let's just take a look here and see it also. Let's see here. So this is going to proc the, this is going to proc your spore-infused anomalies as well, which is awesome, and your deflector. So it's a 2-for on that one all around. Great debuff and procking both the other abilities. Photonic Officer, we talked about this. I use this on most of my builds, science or not, especially on my free-to-play, that is. This gives us a 2% reduction in our Bridge Officer cooldown every second. So every second you get 2% off while it's running. This is extended out for the full 30 seconds. So this is going to be basically constantly running, and it's going to be proccing our Starship Trait Improved Photonic Officer. Next, we have Photonic Shockwave, and let's just look at it down here. So Photonic Shockwave is going to deal a good amount of kinetic damage. It's also going to give us a debuff to the enemy of 30 kinetic damage resistance for 10 seconds. Just about all these science abilities are going to affect our engines, which I've been kind of skipping over because we covered that on the engine part. But this is going to proc spore-infused anomalies, and it's also going to proc all of our science modules that came from the Fleet Research Lab. So great ability. It's one of those ones where it's like okay by itself, but when you're able to pair it up with all these other things, that's when the stuff really, really starts to shine. Lastly, we have Gravity Well 3. The way that this particular build is put together, what are we getting out of it? Let's look at the stats down here. So this is going to pull everything in. This has an 8.4 kilometer rating. The maximum is 12. This isn't a control heavy build. I want to get as much as I can, but we're really doing our damage through EPG, and that's more than enough for me. Negative repel rating, that's something that's really cool. If you can get that high, it's hard to do that without kind of giving up a whole bunch of other stuff, but that's how fast things get pulled in. It does a decent amount of kinetic damage. It also procs the spore-infused anomalies. It also procs your science consoles. It's just a great all-around everything's kind of focuses around this ability, right? So I pull everything in, put Genesis Seed on, or use Delayed Overload, or the Ion Storm, being able to group up and then use these AoEs. That's where you're going to get the most out of a build like this. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick look at the bridge officers, and then we'll show a quick demonstration run. Or, I'm sorry, the duty officers. And I had some in here, guys, that were like Borg duty officers. They're not, I mean, they are lockbox. They don't come from any, they didn't break the rules of the restrictions I had, but they're outrageously expensive. So I just took them off. And the 2 test runs I've already done on this, one of them I died in. I just had some bad piloting, but it did 250K in an ISA just random run. And that's with basically no duty officers. Law gives you a little bit faster recharge in your torpedo. Boimler gives you a toxic cloud proc. It doesn't even show up on the parse because it's so low. So I could have just blown all these out. So look for, things that are going to recharge your deflector abilities, or if you have some of the Borg duty officers, like for this particular ship, 43 of 47, that's going to give you, anytime you use a science ability, you got a 15% chance to reduce command bridge officer abilities by 50%. Anytime you use a command ability, you have a 30% chance to reduce science bridge officer abilities. I was running 2 of these on here, but they can be quite expensive and sometimes they're hard to get, so I just took them off for the build video. But if you have these or can get your hands on these are good, and there's quite a few other ones that I'm sure you'll be able to find that just fit in there. Anything, like I said, that's deflector related, or there's some that'll take your charged particle burst and turn it into a placate as well. There's quite a few things that you could put in here to fill it out. Again, what I want to use, I just felt like it was just kind of too outrageous, so I just left it out for the demonstration here. All right, lastly, for full disclosure, let's take a look at my endeavors. They are a lot lower than what they should be. I know I'm always preaching do them, but I generally just do the super easy ones just because. But here's what they look like. Exotic damage is one of my higher ones at plus 40%, critical severity plus 40% as well. Crit chance, 8.5, or that's ground. Where's space? Is it even up here? Yeah, it is up here. Crit chance, we're at 9.8 or 9.5. So we're getting some nice boosts, but there's a lot of you guys that are already at 750, right? So I'm way down there. It's nice to have. If you don't have it, it's not the end of the day. End of the day? Is that right? End of the world. My God, guys. All right, let's jump into a demonstration. Because this is a higher end build, I'm going to run it through an ISA. I'm just going to do a random so we can just get a good baseline on how this thing is performing, and then we'll do a quick breakdown on the parse, and that will be it. All right, guys, let's check it out. All right, so I'm just gonna keep the mic on for the run here. I'll try and talk through it a bit. Some of these move pretty quick depending on who all's in here. We got a Section 31 battle cruiser. We got another one of this same ship. So we'll do our best here. There's not a lot to pre-buff on this, and sometimes I go back and forth between what abilities I need to save. You'll have to figure out, what's the best way you want to go about flying the ship yourself. I think I'm going to save my gravity well for one of the sides. It's got some cannon scatter volley users. The real drawback on this build is that I don't have emergency power to engines in order to cool down the evasive maneuvers. So I find myself being pretty slow on the crossing, which is a bummer. And I'm almost like, hopefully this takes longer so that I'm not just crawling across, which is what I'm going to end up doing here, which is a bummer. I'm 7 seconds before I can even speed boost, so most of this might be dead over here. That's the only drawback complaint that I have on this build, is the mobility just kind of sucks on it. I probably should save gravity well for the middle, but I better back up. I'm about to die. Whoop. Temple backstep. Okay, I'm going to need to be really careful. We're going to use gravity well here, because otherwise this is going to be a mess, I think. Alright, now I really should wait for my team to really start getting into the middle, because I cannot afford to pull too much aggro. Start dropping a few things on it here. Don't look at me, Cube. That's the problem with some of these science builds, is that they do a good amount of damage, and that attracts a lot of attention on these bigger targets. That can be a bummer, especially with not a lot in the way of heals. Whew, that was close, guys. All right, let's pull the parse up. My parse file is big, so that'll take a few moments. So we'll clip that wait out here for a moment. Be right back with you, and we'll take a look at the parse. All right, here's what we got here. So we did 193, almost 194K on that. It's not too bad. They didn't go super long. The rest of the team, for the most part, did a pretty good job. I did take quite a bit of damage there on the right side. So you got to be careful. I probably should have went farther to the outside and flanked inward, so I didn't have my back to more enemies taking hits. Builds like this, you really need to think about where you're positioning, not just for maximum damage output, but also for survivability reasons. Let's take a look at the breakdown. We won't go through every little piece on this, or it'll be just crazy long. All right, so secondary deflector, it did the most damage, 55K, which is really good. Delayed overload cascade, 31K, which is excellent. Pets, gravity well, and there's a million things on this because of just all the different abilities, but those are our top things. Let's take a look at what pets are. Some things show up as pets, so there's obviously no hangar bays on this, so that's not what it is. Genesis C did 11K on that. Cryonic Turbulence did 5. Badlands Cyclone did 5, so it wasn't a ton from that. Some of these also break up the main effect will be on the player side, and the secondary effect will be on the pet side. So overall, I'm pretty happy with that. We had almost a 60% crit rate. One hit maximum. What do we have here? 397. It's not too bad. Debuff was a little bit low, but all in all, pretty good. And really, when it comes down to those, if you're running with you're running with a tank, or you're taking this into like HSE or something like that, that's where you're going to really see a build like this shine. Just so we have some reference here, let's take a look at the last run that I did. And I actually died on this one, but I still scored 243K, which is pretty good. Similar kind of breakdown as the rest. I think I probably just did some better activations on this, because this run was actually slightly longer as well. And I died on this one as well once. So the science builds, got to be careful. But that's true with a lot of these builds. I mean, if you're building for maximum damage output, they can be somewhat glass cannon-like, and so you really need to manage your threat, your positioning. You can take glass cannons in and do good all day long and not die, but you got to really know what you're doing in terms of those positionings, controlling your threat, placating, different things like that, and maybe when not to engage. So like I held back a little bit at the cube. That probably costed me a little bit in terms of damage, but if I would have started in before everybody else got there, I would have been focused and died. So those are all things that make a build like this fun, that you have to manage. There's other builds where you're not going to do as much damage, but you have a lot more heals, and you're managing the heals and doing those, and those are fun as well. It's just a different play style. So it just depends on what you're into. So all in all, this build's great. I've had a lot of fun flying this. I've mainly been flying this build for the past week or two since I unlocked the ship. Again, big thank you to Nick MB. Again, I'll put a link down in the description to his Twitch. Make sure you turn on the notifications so when he's live. He's one of those guys in the game. He just really understands it on that next level, and is a super big help to me and others. So thank you to him. All right, guys, I think that does it. I'm sure I'm missing something, and I'll remember as soon as I upload this. So if that's the case, I'll put it in the comments below. If you have questions, let me know what you think down in the comments. Let me know what you're going to do with your build. Again, if you want something that's more budget-friendly, I do have a build for that, and that is going to be listed down in the description and should be popping up on the screen right about now. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you. Hey, guys. Appreciate you watching. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button, ring the bell, and sub to the channel for the latest news updates and how-to guides.